Welcome to All Things Green. I'm Shelby, here with my co-host Anton to discuss a variety of topics from across the sustainability universe. Anton, how are you today?
Doing most excellent. How are you?
I'm doing great. I see you have something to show me.
I have a morel mushroom.
Okay.
So I went foraging in a wildlife management area the other day, and that's a public land. It's okay to forage there. And this is a morel mushroom, and these are edible. These are really tasty. They smell good. Go ahead, give it a sniff.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
I wanted to give it a real sniff for the
It was good,
audio-only listeners.
And so what you'll do is you'll chop these up nice and fine, saute them in some butter, maybe some onion, and just eat them like that. They're really good, just plain. They are so delicious.
I love mushrooms. How do you know that that's a morel? Like, what are you looking for to know that that's not going to kill you?
So yeah, it's a very unique looking mushroom. It has like this honeycomb looking structure to it. You'll also know that it's a morel because the stem is hollow. You can see right down to the bottom there. So what a lot of people will do, they'll cut it right down in half. They'll soak them in a little bit of water with salt to just make sure all the critters are out of the mushroom. Oh. And then, they'll prepare it. But definitely make sure you know what you're doing. You don't want to poach on like any private land either. Because you don't want to piss anybody off, obviously.
Absolutely. And you don't want to get a mushroom that's not for eating.
Yeah. There are false morels, so that will kill you. So make sure you don't pick those. Just pick the real morels.
I feel nervous about the fact that I even just sniffed that, knowing that that's a possibility.
I would eat this right now.
And you came themed with it for your shirt.
Yes, I'm feeling groovy today.
I love that. Yeah.
Mushrooms are cool.
I think so too. So, quick question about you said clear all the critters out. What do you mean?
Well, there's just like ants and like, I don't know, larvae and stuff in there probably still. I mean, I can't see them.
I can't believe you put that so close to my face, but I'm excited about it.
Well, I knew they weren't going to jump out. You got to coax them out with that salt water. You know?
I got it. Well, thanks for showing us
absolutely.
A morel mushroom that you found yourself.
Really cool. They're delicious.
We'll keep it there with us as a friend for the show today.
Exactly. Our little morel friend.
Yeah. I don't know how to forage. Maybe you'll have to teach me.
Yes. Me neither. I'm pretty bad at it, but I did find one. So.
See, you just told me you could find a false morel that could kill you, and then told me you were bad at foraging. This seems like a bad combination.
I'm very well researched, but when it comes to actually finding an abundance, that's where I fall short.
I see. Precision, not accuracy. Or maybe the opposite. Okay, great. Well, I was going to talk a little bit about like some little animals that I've been seeing lately because it's spring.
Please.
Because I can't look for mushrooms, but I can look for chipmunks. I've got a keen eye.
Yes.
And so there's this trail near my home, and I go walking on it like several nights a week after I get home from work with my husband. And I saw my very first chipmunk of the season.
Really?
Yesterday.
Exciting.
Ooh, it was so good. And it was like not running across the ground. It was kind of in a little bush. Like you would have thought it was a bird, but
it was just vibing.
I got it. Yeah. Now, advice for chipmunk foragers, you can't pick those up. They're not like mushrooms. All of them are wrong to pick up. So just look at them from afar.
A cool noise that a chipmunk makes, I think it's during like the hot months in the summer. Mm-hmm. They'll make like that water, like that faucet dripping noise. Have you heard that?
Yeah.
They're like, and it's like, what is that? It's a chipmunk.
It's a chipmunk. You wouldn't expect it. It kind of sounds. They can also do that little chirping sound, kind of like a bird. But anyway, that's what we've been seeing around here in Northeast Ohio. Morel mushrooms, chipmunks. But let's talk about a different part of the world, shall we?
Let's do it.
I'll start by saying that we're kind of doing a water theme for this week.
Yeah,
you excited?
Waterlogged.
Yeah, I should say for this episode, waterlogged. Yeah. So I wanted to start by talking about places that actually don't get a whole lot of rain, places we don't think about as particularly watery. So before we jump into it, I just want to ask right at the top, have you heard about fog catching?
Never.
Fog catching.
Sounds cool. It sounds like Avatar something.
Yeah. What would you think, like if I say fog catching, like what does that bring to mind for you?
I don't know. It sounds like religious or something.
Okay. Yeah.
Sounds pretty cool is all I'm saying. I don't know.
Yeah.
Celestial.
I like that. Actually, the article I read was called The Ethereal Art of fog
Ooh.
catching. So you're not that far off.
Okay. I didn't think I was.
The first time I learned about fog catching was when I was watching this docuseries that was called Food 2050. And it's a series of short videos where they went all around the world and talked with local communities about what they were doing to transform food in their communities. And that looked like agriculture products, nutrition education projects, all sorts of different projects that were happening everywhere from right here in the US to Asia, Africa, South America, all over the place. And one really stood out to me was in Lima, where they were talking about having more access to water because it's a place that they really don't get rain.
Interesting.
I was really curious about it after watching the sort of 7-minute video, which will, of course, be linked in the show notes. So I went and did a little more research, and that's where I found The Ethereal Art of Fog Catching,
Nice.
an article from BBC.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what fog catching is. It's this technology that's meant to capture water from the air rather than from rain or from like a freshwater source.
Yeah.
So Lima was the example from the video that I watched, but this happens in lots of different drier climates across the world. In climates like that, you're not going to get enough rain to be able to collect a rain barrel full that can then nourish your family, nourish your crops, your livestock, etc.
Right.
And you also may not have access to a freshwater source like a river or a lake.
Or a drinking well.
Exactly. And so communities are using these fog catchers, which you can picture as like kind of a giant wall of mesh. And so the mesh will collect humidity, will collect fog from the air, and it sort of collects on the mesh pieces. When you look at it, it's all like dewy and beautiful. You know,
That sounds beautiful. Yeah.
it really is. And they don't have to be super advanced. It can be fairly simple structure, but it collects the water and then they divert that water into containers so they can store fresh water for everything we talked about, for livestock, for crops, for your family, just regular old drinking water. And one of those sort of mesh walls, mesh sheets, I'm sure they come in all sorts of different sizes, but quoting the article here, that can collect around 200 to 400 liters of water.
That's plenty.
It's plenty, yeah. It's like 50 to 100 gallons in U.S. measures, which is like a bathtub or two of water.
Yeah, 50 gallons, that's like one rain barrel. So
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that. So if we're talking about these sort of alternative water capture methods, this is for places that are dry, where you can't capture rainwater. But we've got climates all over the place that still need to utilize water better. So I wanted to give you a chance to sort of refresh our memory on your water collection.
Yeah, so I have rain barrels in my house. So not in my house, outside of my house. And when we have a rain, whether it's heavy or light, you're going to have those rain droplets hit the roof and they collect in the gutters. They go down my downspout and into my rain barrel. I collect this rainwater to use it for watering my native plants. I would like to put a garden in, water my garden. I'm not going to use it for drinking water, but it also benefits our region by making sure that we're not taking a toll on our infrastructure in an unnecessary way. You know, instead of it going down these ancient pipes, it's just maybe disconnected. It goes into our groundwater instead.
Yeah, I love that story as a compliment to this because it's something that you as an individual could do. And that's sort of the same case for these fog catchers. There are communities around the world that are doing this in more of a large scale infrastructure way. But the little mini documentary that I watched also just showed individuals who were putting up fog catchers in or near their homes. Apparently, I learned this, there's a lot of flat roofs because it doesn't rain, so they don't have to worry about like having a roof that'll let rain slick off. So it's a lot of flat roofs. And so people will have like gardens on top of their roofs and like
cool.
You can put these up around there. I loved this story partially because it was kind of cool, simple science and technology because it was solving a climate related problem. But I also loved it because it really illustrated the resilience of communities that are kind of consistently marginalized.
Yeah.
When we talk about the global south, when we talk about places that are hot and dry, they're often in communities that have been marginalized because that's just the way that we've sort of globalized as a society. And so these are communities that have always had to really advocate for themselves. And this is just one more way those communities are doing that. They're looking around, they're noticing an issue in their community and saying, I have something that I can do about this, even when the world won't pay attention. I saw this also in Oman. That makes it sound like I was there. I saw this on TV in Oman. I watched this TV show called Expedition with Steve Backshall. He's a naturalist out of UK. This show's on BBC, but you can watch it on PBS too.
Okay.
And he went to Oman, and he focuses on doing kind of adventure-y things, but one of his episodes, he was looking at other ways that people are capturing water. Oman, very hot, very dry. It's in the desert, but they have these ancient aqueducts that are able to collect rainwater from the highlands that will then sort of let it flow into the community. Now, that said, it's getting drier and hotter, and it's getting worse, and water's always been scarce.
Yeah.
But still, communities are finding ways, and Oman, too, is starting to implement some of these fog catchers. So, yeah, I just kind of wanted to share a cool new technology that was new to me.
That is really cool, and I hope that other places that are dry, like especially in the Southwest in the United States, they probably can't do any fog catching.
Yeah.
But hopefully there are innovative ways that communities can come together and solve their water problems. I don't have any ideas off the top of my head. That's not my expertise. But it's really cool to see this happen in Lima, Peru. And, as climate change continues to run its course, we're going to need to come up with creative solutions. Thankfully, this is like an inexpensive and thrifty way to harvest rainwater for these people. Or
yeah.
Fog water.
Fog water, that's right. Well, yeah, thanks for talking about fog catchers with me, but let's move on to another water topic.
Wonderful. So I read an article recently by Inside Climate News talking about salmon.
Salmon, I love salmon.
Yeah, it's good. It's really good.
Good for you, too.
Is it?
Oh, yeah, very healthy.
Really? Like omega-3s or what?
Absolutely.
Protein?
It's a lean protein, but it's also got some fat in there.
Okay.
Not to mention it's delicious.
It is delicious. A nice flaky salmon. Yeah, wonderful. Well, it's not about how to cook salmon, although we should talk about that sometime.
Absolutely.
This is about a lawsuit filed by the Soxwayatl tribe, indigenous tribe. If anybody knows how to say that better than I did, please write us in the comments. The indigenous tribe filed a lawsuit against the city of Seattle because the dams in Seattle were preventing salmon from swimming upstream, from feeding and reproducing. Overall, salmon were not able to thrive because of these dams. And what the indigenous tribe claimed was that these salmon have the right to exist and thrive. And thankfully, Seattle actually ruled in favor and agreed with the tribe, and they said, yeah, we have to retrofit these dams and make sure that there's access for these salmon to make their way upstream. So I thought that was really cool, like the idea that nature has the right to exist. I hope that we see more judges rule this way so that we can see progress for the environment, for indigenous tribes, and the overall ecosystem. It affects us too.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this story. I love.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. I also love that it's hitting on a couple of different things that we're interested in. So one, it's like a community advocating for itself. So this indigenous culture said, or the people from this indigenous culture said, salmon are important to us.
Yeah.
It's part of our way of life. It's a part of our food system. And we're going to advocate on our own behalf where you are not doing so on my behalf. I love that. I love self-advocacy even when I wish that we didn't have to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
I also love that it's protecting nature for nature's sake, too.
Yeah.
People had to bring that lawsuit because our laws are built around people and people's property, but that it eventually was saying, essentially, these salmon have a right to exist on their own.
Yeah.
And I love that when we talk about this, it's easy to take the lens of a victory for this indigenous group, which it is.
Yeah.
But salmon are more than that. They feed bears. So
Yeah.
like they are a part of this larger ecosystem. And as you said, like it affects you and me too. It affects everybody who's sort of in the ecosystem at all. And
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal, and it actually reminds me a little bit of Toledo's Lake Erie Bill of Rights, which I know we're going to talk a little bit. I don't want to steal your thunder.
No,
but
spoiler alert.
I just want to reference it. Toledo is a city in Ohio that sits on Lake Erie, and they actually brought a ballot initiative trying to protect Lake Erie as almost like a person. Like anybody could sue on behalf of Lake Erie if like a bad actor or something were to, I don't know, flush something down into a drainage ditch or something like that. The lake itself would have protection legally just because it's its own person, kind of. I don't know if I'm saying that in a legal way, but
yeah, that makes sense to me, and we'll get into it even more later.
Yeah.
But it's a very similar concept, this idea of like the right of nature or environmental personhood. These are some of the buzzwords we throw around. In this case, we're talking about Lake Erie, but going back to your original story, we're talking about the salmon themselves, but also the ecosystem that they exist within, the things the salmon eat, the things that eat the salmon, the way that impacts the water. Did you know that we actually brought salmon into the Great Lakes years and years ago? Like,
I did.
They're not indigenous to our Great Lakes,
Yeah.
but you can certainly fish for them now.
Yeah, I think that's so cool. My friend Rusty actually caught a salmon a few years ago.
That's cool.
Yeah, good old Rusty.
How big was it?
It was sizable. I think like maybe foot and a half.
Okay, so we got to subtract a few inches from that because fishermen, they add on. But yeah, salmon actually aren't indigenous to our Great Lakes, but I read this great book called The Death and Life of the Great Lakes by Dan Egan, and it talked all about the fact that similar to what's happening in Seattle, in the Great Lakes, we also saw changes to the lake's ecosystem. We started having transport ships come in through the Great Lakes, and they would bring with them the sort of salt water from the ocean that would come out into the Great Lakes that would have creatures in it that are not native. That's not how we got our salmon. That was very intentional. But it would then mess with our own waterways. And so I'm excited to sort of talk about how similar but different things are happening right here in our backyard.
Yeah, we definitely got to make an episode talking about like invasive species.
100%.
The zebra mussels that you're talking about, the gobies, all of that is going to be fun to talk about. But yeah, I wanted to bring this article to light. I just think it's cool that we're kind of thinking more about the environment as having a right to exist. And I think that's really important moving forward, not only for salmon, but for things that are close to home.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move a little closer to home.
Yeah.
And kind of go back to this idea of the Lake Erie Bill of Rights and other things that are happening here. We started talking about the legal system and how, at least in the U.S., our legal system is built around people's rights and people's rights to property.
Yeah.
That's kind of everything that we're legislating. And so you talked about the Lake Erie Bill of Rights. As you said, this was a ballot measure in the city of Toledo that was passed. The citizens of Toledo passed it. They said that we think that Lake Erie has its own right to exist. We want to be able to sue on behalf of Lake Erie because it should be able to remain healthy as its own entity.
Yeah. So yeah, I heard that passed, but unfortunately a federal judge struck that down. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So disagreeing with the rights of citizens to vote on behalf of things that are in their own backyard, a federal judge said, sure, this is a great idea, but also there's no legal standing for this.
Right.
And, I mean, I'll throw out there that legal standing kind of depends on legal precedent. So maybe that was an opportunity for a judge to say that there is some environmental personhood, but I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how all that works. But yeah, a federal judge said that we don't really have any way to enforce something like this. We don't know what it looks like to keep something like the Lake Erie Bill of Rights alive. So they struck it down, and the citizens of Toledo and other Great Lakes states that were hoping to clean up the Great Lakes were sort of lost on, well, what do we do next?
Yeah.
But you know us environmentalists, we never stop.
Never, ever.
And so all sorts of other advocacy was going into trying to keep Lake Erie clean. And we actually just had a big win here in May. So a different federal judge actually just kept a law. That's probably not how you talk about that.
No.
Current federal judge passed, ruled that the Ohio EPA is going to have to enforce regulations that prevent toxic algae bloom in Lake Erie. So I think you are familiar with this doing your work, right?
A little bit, yeah. So like as a Soil and Water Conservation District board member, and let me also add, I am a Cuyahoga County, so we're a little bit more urban. We're not super rural, but I've met a lot and talked to a lot of these farmers and board members out in the Lake Erie Western Basin, and they have manure, nutrient runoff, and they have chemical fertilizers and stuff like that that end up in the drainage ditch. Those drainage ditch end up flowing into a river or into Lake Erie. So
yeah, our watersheds are all connected, and so if you're a farmer whose watershed is connected into Lake Erie, as you said, water runoff from manure and chemical fertilizers contains phosphorus.
Right.
It contains all sorts of things, but specifically what this judge was ruling on was the issue of phosphorus that is then going into Lake Erie and then creating these toxic algae blooms. They're not very nice to look at. They're not very nice to smell. You really don't want to go swimming or even drinking your water.
Yeah.
And Lake Erie is a huge source of water for the people who are living around that Great Lake. And so we've had issues over the last years and decades where cities, including Toledo, have had to shut off water because of these toxic algal blooms and then find other sources for it. So it's a really big deal, and I'm excited to see that where one measure failed, a different measure has passed to allow us to have a little bit more oversight in protecting the lake.
Absolutely. And, of course, there's these farmers, they shouldn't all be demonized. There's some people who really care about this. They pick up their nutrient on their land. They make sure that the runoff isn't maybe as significant by planting native plants that absorb these chemicals and things in their drainage ditches. So there's plenty of people out there who really care, but there's also bad actors, and I think that's where the importance of government steps in. They can play referee a little bit and ensure that everybody's following the rules.
Yeah, totally. And you have a lot more interaction with these farmers than I do on sort of like a daily basis in your job. I imagine it's something that farmers have some control over, but it's probably not an easy thing for them to do. So what do you think about like where Ohio EPA may play a role in helping farmers to be able to sort of reach solutions? Do you see that as part of their role, or does that belong to somebody else?
Well, I think that Ohio EPA will definitely make sure that people are following the rules. I'm not entirely sure that they'll give them the resources to make their job any easier. And I think that's where maybe a lot of the skepticism for government in general comes in. Like they're regulating us and they're not even helping us. But I will say the bright side is we have a soil and water conservation district in each and every county in Ohio, all 88 counties. And those people, those staff members are really dedicated and hardworking and willing to communicate those new regulations and how to keep up with them. Like, what are the best management practices? So it's nice to have that organization in your own county that can help you out there. So
is that something that farmers would have access to? Is like that committee or group in their county as a resource to be able to make some of these changes?
100%. Yeah, these are people who are oftentimes farmers themselves. They're people who have gone to school to not only protect the environment, but to help farmers conserve their land, conserve their waterways, and protect their livestock and their crops. So these are people who are very knowledgeable and friendly. So
I love that. And I love that you gave some examples of ways that farmers are actually doing this with like collecting things via native plants. Are there other little tidbits you want to share with us about ways that farmers are or can help prevent this runoff?
I know that to prevent like any sediment runoff, I think sometimes this phosphorus can build up in soils. Some farmers will actually create like a two-tiered system. Like they'll put like sandbags in their drainage ditch to kind of slow the flow of water on a really heavy rainy day. Because on a really heavy rainy day, you're going to get these fast rushing waters that go straight down this straight channel of water, and it'll kind of erode the banks a little bit and bring the soil that has phosphorus attached to it downstream. Some farmers are kind of combating that by putting in these like tiered systems like I was talking about, maybe sandbags. It'll kind of create a wetland naturally and filter out some of those chemicals and also slow down the erosion process as well.
Yeah, I love that. So it sounds like it's already a win. It's a win that this federal judge has said, you have to regulate this.
Yeah.
And then there are other additional ways to keep the win going, because there are real resources out there for people to make their farms more sustainable, which, as you said, I think most farmers are doing their jobs because they really want people to thrive. Like, it's not an easy job. And so to do that means that you care and
100%.
You want to do your best. And when it's hard, there are resources out there.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we can share some of those in the show notes too. So if that applies to you or you know someone it applies to, you can share it out. And I'm excited to see what this does in a positive way for our lake.
Yeah, 100%. We'll definitely give more updates on this in the future. Hopefully, by the time we are still running this podcast, we'll talk about the reduce in algae blooms in the next few years. Let's manifest that.
I certainly am.
And Shelby, would you mind telling us our viewers? Shelby, how about I tell our viewers how they can stay in touch with us?
Absolutely. I'd love that.
If you'd like to stay connected to us, be sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at One Planet Media. That's ONE1. And if you'd like to rewatch full episodes, check out our YouTube channel, All Things Green Show. You can find all of our sources from today's episode in the show notes.
We'll be back at the same time next week to bring you more news. Thank you for being part of the global sustainability movement. Yeah.
All right.
I thought that someone's phone was going off.